If there's anybody out there, any young guy who's watching this, who's been having vengeful fantasies and who has been developing and toying with fantasies of revenge and who is feeling isolated and lonesome and oppressed and isolated and is starting to spin up fantasies of violence in revenge. And you'll know that if you're one of these people. Find someone to talk to. There's better ways you can deal with this. And you're young, you're 16, you're 17, you don't have to be doomed, you know? You got your whole life ahead of you. And maybe just getting out of the place that you're in where you're unpopular might do it for you. You know, you can move to somewhere else and be a new person. There's all sorts of pathways in life. And so you don't have to explosively demonstrate your competence, you know, in a single vengeful, violent act. There are better ways to deal with the world. And you might have reason to be bitter and vengeful, but there are better paths forward. So find someone, a teacher, a principal, someone, a policeman if it has to be. These school shooters. So my understanding of their psychology is that they're resentful, they're low down on the status hierarchy, they're not attractive to potential mates, they're not necessarily very popular, and they don't have a lot of hope for attaining any of that in the future. So they're very, very frustrated by that lowly position. And that makes them angry, it makes them resentful. Then it starts to generate compensatory fantasies, which would be, well, I'll do something. I'll show them. I'll show them. I'll show them. I'm going to be famous. Everybody's going to know who I am. And then they can drift into these violent fantasies. And sometimes that's motivated also by thoughts of direct revenge because they've been bullied and they've been pushed around. And so they have reasons to be angry, let's say. No, I'm not saying any of this is justified, by the way. I'm just saying how it works. And then they brood for weeks, months, and years developing these fantasies of violence. But more importantly, focusing on the consequences for notoriety of the violent act. One of the things that I've been suggesting to people who are interested in this sort of thing is people on the media side is that they don't use the shooters' names. They don't report the shooters' names. And I think because the thing about the mass shooters in particular is they've learned how to hijack the media world to provide themselves with hundreds of millions of dollars worth of free publicity, to draw attention to their manifestos, for example. But also, and then they can have these fantasies. It's like the same kind of fantasy that a suicidal teenager will have, because the suicidal teenager will often fantasize about as if he's a spirit that will be there at his funeral, with everybody huddled around the coffin, including the boys and girls who rejected him, expressing their sympathy for the way that he behaved, expressing their sorrow for the mistreatment that he suffered. The parents are doing the same thing. And he sees this in a very dramatic sense. And there's an elaboration of that on the violent side. And they want to be notorious. And you ask why, and why boys, not girls? And the answer is, well, success to boys is linked with popularity with girls, for example, in a way that it's simply not linked for girls with boys. And it's a huge difference. You don't get to the point where you do something like shoot up the school without, I would say, literally hundreds of hours of fantastic dreaming about the event, about the day, about what's going to happen afterwards and how your name is going to be on everyone's lips. The thing that's been so terrible to me to see is out on my tours talking to audiences, many of whom are young men who are suffering the consequences of the sorts of things that we've been discussing. So many of them are suffering so intensely for lack of a single encouraging word. Yes. You know, and it's so sad that they have to get that from me on YouTube or in a lecture, that they haven't had anyone in their life. And we're in this situation now where, you know, frequently any manifestation of masculine ambition in even its juvenile forms, so the desire to engage in rambunctious play, let's say, is instantly associated not only with pathology that needs to be medicated, let's say in the case of ADHD, which I do think is a disorder of repressed play. And, you know, we associate that male ambition with, well, the force that's literally, the patriarchal oppressive force that's literally destroying the world.